Welcome to the Caregiving Podcast. I'm Inga.
And I'm Julie.
And long story short, we have Caregiving. We are two momtrepreneurs who have built an in-home care business from the ground up, guided every step of the way by God's care and fueled by agape love. Almost 14 years later, we felt called to create this podcast as a resource for families with caregiving needs. Whether you care for a family member or are looking for advice on professional caregiving, we want this to be a platform to support you.
Each week, we will come to you with encouraging stories of families who have found the right balance for their loved ones, tips for how to care for them and you, and much more. We hope you continue to join us each week as we share in this exciting new journey together.
Hello, Sunshines, and hello, Julie. How the heck are you?
I'm really good.
Well, we have a pretty exciting podcast today that we're going to be recording.
Oh, yeah. It's what I love about this podcast is that in our library of podcasts, we have talked about this topic in separate situations.
Sure.
End of life paperwork, what is hospice, all of those. But this is going to bring it all together in a really, actually, good way, because it's just, once again, education, but it's not an easy topic.
Yeah. Well, and you actually brought someone here.
Yes.
And this is someone that you have a very, very long history with. So tell me, what's your favorite childhood memory to go along with the friend that we're going to be talking with today?
Oh, my word. When I was raised in a very small country rural area, and my whole life, besides stuff at high school and being a cheerleader, was 4-H. And with that, every year got to go to the county fair with your animal. And that is where I met our special guest today, Polly.
Welcome,
Hi.
Polly.
Polly Cavill, yes. She was actually in a town 17 miles from us. She was also a cheerleader. But one of the things is we both took steers. And after the steer sale, we would always cry because we loved our animals so much. And the way that we did that was food therapy. all of the fair food.
And Sanders County has the best.
Yeah, they really do. Yeah, really do. So anyway, we've just been in touch throughout the years. She's that very good friend that you don't always see or don't always talk to, but when you do talk to them, it's like you talked to them yesterday.
Yes.
And those are the bestest kinds.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I'm excited because you've talked to me a lot about Polly. And so to actually get to meet you and then talk to you on a professional level, it's just really cool how everything is intersecting yet again in you and Julie's lives. So she, when I think it's been a couple of weeks or a month or so that this opportunity came up. And so Julie has really, really been excited about this.
Awesome.
So don't let us down, Polly.
Oh, no pressure here.
Teasing. I think it's hilarious that as we're talking before we get started, you're like, Julie is the same Julie that she's been. She is Julie.
Love it or leave it.
Changed. She's genuine.
She is genuine.
There's nothing fake about her.
Nope. What you see is what you get, and she's our Julie.
Oh, goodness. Oh, goodness.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, we're at the point where we go into our verse of the week. And again, Julie picks these out, and she picked a really, really great one. I'm going to go ahead and read it. This is Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verses 1 through 8. There is a time for everything and a season for every activity under the heavens, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to tear down and a time to build, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to scatter stones and a time to gather them, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to search and a time to give up, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to mend, a time to be silent and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace.
Pretty loaded, isn't it?
It is very loaded.
Yeah.
There's lots of times.
Oh, there's so many times. Yeah, and when I think about the topic that we're going to be talking about today, it was actually verse 2 that was specific to a time to live and a time to die. But as I was thinking about that, you know what? Life is all of those other things. So let's talk about the awesome of life as we then talk about the end of life. So that's why I thought, let's read the whole shebang.
Let's do it. That was a good one.
Yeah.
Well, our listeners, we always do invite our listeners to share their favorite verses, they can email them to us at thecaregivenpodcast@gmail.com. And what Julie likes to do is sort through those things and really try to find a verse that fits in with the topic. So she's done an excellent job in our 40 plus episodes of finding just the precisely right verse to go along. So thank you for that, Julie. And listeners, send them in to us so Julie has stuff to pick from. The next thing that we like to do in our podcast is actually talk about an uplifting story or some type of piece of advice or article. So what did you bring to us, Julie?
So I found a story. It's actually today's daily devotion, and it's called The Caretaker versus the Caregiver. So I wish you didn't always have to drive, my husband Lynn told me wistfully as I drove past a busy 4-lane highway in the dark after a family birthday party. A couple of years ago, I moved from the passenger seat to my permanent place in the driver's seat while Lynn began suffering the more serious long-term effects of brain cancer, surgeries, and radiation. Moving into a caregiving role is an emotionally complicated adjustment in a marriage. Lynn and I had been slowly rearranging some job descriptions we'd taken for granted in our more than 50 years together. But his loss of some of these roles and responsibilities chipped away at his self-image and confidence. I wanted to take care of him without making him feel that way, but he didn't want me to take care of him. What helped us is understanding the difference from being a caregiver versus a caretaker. Caretaking takes something away from a person without regard to how that person feels, while caregiving gives the gift of care to others.
Oh, wow.
That may sound simplistic, but the different shapes of response to Lynn's comments like, I wish I could drive. I understand, I said that night on our trip home, but I don't mind driving, and I want you the freedom from the stress of driving. Thank you, he said.
Oh.
Isn't that sweet? Just basically caregiving gives the gift of care.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that really kind of nails it, doesn't it?
I thought it actually would tie right into our conversation today.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, my story starts on Facebook a couple weeks ago. I have a Facebook friend who lives in Oklahoma, and she had posted this just a little inspirational something or other that I read through, and I was like, ooh, I really, really like that. So I reshared it, I guess, and it gained a little bit of steam. And in doing so, a friend of mine said, hey, where did that come from? What book is that? So I went backwards, followed back, traced back to where I had originally seen it, was able to find the book that it came from, which is this Daily Wisdom, 365 Days of Motivational Thoughts, Quotes, and Stories. And anyway, I then, once I found it, I was like, well, I have to have this book. And I also have to send it to my friend that was so interested in it. I'm going to read it to you, and then I'm going to tell you what happened when the book arrived at her house. Okay. So it is titled, Are You Complaining or Contributing? Don't complain. 80% of the people you complain to don't care, and 20% are glad that you have problems. This was a quote from Lou Holtz. Champions never complain. They're too busy contributing. Complaining never makes anything better. Pay attention to the people who complain a lot, and you will find that they are probably not leading. Complainers whine about how bad things are, while leaders make things better. If you have the time and energy to complain about something, you have the time and energy to change something. Are you complaining, or are you getting better? Making things better and finding a solution. It requires a lot of energy to perform at your best. Don't waste any of your valuable time and energy complaining or worrying about things you can't control. It's not worth it. Winners train while losers complain. Oh. Now, this hits me very deeply because in my personal life and professional life, we like to see ourselves as leaders, and, we don't want to complain. If there's something that you can invest the energy on complaining about, we want to look to innovate and make changes, and how do we become a solution to this problem? But what's really interesting about this book, so I went on to Amazon Prime, find it, I send it to my friend, it's going to a different city in Montana, town in Montana, and I put my little message in there about, hey, Tommy, I know you saw this, I thought you'd really like it, enjoy the book, whatever. Somehow, when she gets this package, that message is not with it. So she gets the book, and she opens the package, and she's like, what the heck is this? Where did this come from? I didn't order this. So literally she takes it, she opens it up, and it opens to the exact page of the quote that started the whole thing. And I was like, well, for me, because I'm a believer, I'm like, God just knew where to send her to look, Not everybody, maybe it's just the universe.
A synchronicity.
But it was a synchronicity. Yes, absolutely. So then she basically takes a picture of it, sends it back to me. She's like, hey, did you do this? And I'm like, sure did. And she's like, well, yeah, I had no idea where it came from. Opened it up, and this is the page that it turned to. And I absolutely knew that it was from you. Isn't that crazy?
That's awesome.
And that particular page means so much to me right now. Hits home completely. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
Thanks. I needed that.
Yeah, I think it does for a lot of people, to be honest.
Yeah.
But yeah. Anyway, so
Yeah.
that was my wisdom imparted.
I love
today.
that book. I'm thinking you need to send me one.
And me one. And
Yes. I think everybody needs that.
It's been really fun to read through it, and it is actually like it's dated, January 1st, whatever. So I'm just trying to catch up to where we are. I'm a little ways away, but I am very much enjoying what is in this book. And really, I mean, it is written, I think, from the perspective of basketball, but really, you can apply it to any area of your life.
You bet.
Cool.
You
So
bet.
there it is. Daily wisdom. We'll put it in the show notes, right?
You bet.
Link it in the show
You
notes.
bet. Right on. Okay, so now it is time to talk with Polly. And Polly is an interesting lady. She's got lots of diverse background,
do.
and it's interesting where all of the things that you've done in your life bring you to where you are now. Tell us a little bit about who Polly is.
Oh, let's see. Born and raised in Montana. Grew up in a ranching family, small town, youngest of 4, 55 years old. So lots of experience. So I did 21 years at the Forest Service, but knew Jules. I think we met when we were about 10.
Right.
Did 4-H. My dad was a firefighter, so gone a lot. We changed a lot of pipe, bucked a lot of bales, got bucked off a lot. Still getting bucked off a lot. 21 years at the Forest Service, wildlife degree, baited cameras for grizzly bears, tracked wolf packs, went into the respiratory field. Got divorced, single mom, went back to school, went into healthcare. 15 years, mostly ICU, pediatric, neonatal, went on to a flight team. My specialty is neopeds, but I love adult critical care. I think that's my favorite. And that led to me to where I am now because 15 years in the ICU at the bedside of dead and dying and families, and lots of controversy about whether they were ready for this, whether the doctor was thinking, we were ready for this. I stepped into a role that was just really my own, I guess. I'm not afraid of death. I'm not afraid to talk about death. I don't find it daunting. I don't find it scary. And it's one of those things that nobody really wants to talk about because they don't want it to be too real. And so death is really easy for me to talk about. So when a patient or their family asks me, be honest with me, I'm the first person to step up and say, okay, let's have that conversation. I guess we're ready for it.
Wow.
And am I dying? Okay, well, let's talk about where we're at medically. What's going on? What interventions have we done? And do we think you're going to come out of this? And a lot of times I'm the first person to say, we're not coming out of this. Okay, the next conversation is, can I go home? Statistics say that 80% of people would like to die at home and only 20% get to. So my job was, once we've had that difficult conversation of, are we going to come out of this or am I dying? Then there's people that need to get on board with that process. And so many times it's a family, and there's I don't know how many different types of families there are out there, but I think I've encountered every one of them. And only a few of them where all of them have come to the bedside and been ready to make that transition peacefully, calmly, beautifully. A lot of times it's just a difficult conversation to get everybody there. And almost every time it comes back to, but what does your mom want? Well, I don't know. We've never talked about this. Then you look at mom. No, we've never talked about this. Or mom might be on a ventilator, and, well, is there a form? Has mom written down her wishes? Yeah, but that's not what I want. Well, okay, so then the conversation comes back around to, but what did she want? And I always say, this isn't going to be hard on mom. Death is only hard on the living. And it's our job to make, this is coming. We can't stop this speeding train.
Right.
It's coming. So how are we going to do it gracefully and with love and acceptance and alleviate fears, not just for her, but for all of us, alleviate the fear of death. And I am so comfortable with it that there have been times where I've literally walked into the room and felt like death was standing in the room just waiting for me to show up and have that conversation.
Wow.
And I've had that conversation.
Wow.
I'm like, hey, Death, I see you standing in the corner. Today's the day, huh? And so we have that conversation. I had this fabulous family that had been doing round-the-clock care with their mom with advanced ALS, and she was down to 70 pounds, had lost her ability to speak for like a year. The family had been speaking for her because she could no longer speak. And they were doing round-the-clock cares and taking turns from household to household and stepdad, and they were so entrenched in keeping her alive that they could not see that she was no longer in a quality existence. And they didn't want to have that conversation. Death was off the table. Right. So for me in the ICU, I had her on round the clock non-invasive ventilation, which was, I had to explain to them, it might not be a ventilator, but this is life support. Because if I take her off, she's not going to survive. No, then we're not going to take her off. So we went through this for, 5 to 8 days, all day long, caregivers coming in, family coming in, nobody wanting to have the death conversation. And I waited until I had her alone, and I couldn't take her off the BiPAP to eat or anything. And I looked at her and I said, are we done with this? And she nodded. And I said, would you like me to talk to your family about letting you go?
Wow.
And she nodded, and we were both crying at this point. And I said, can I call him back in?
Wow.
And I said, you want me to initiate this conversation?
Wow.
And I did. First, I called her husband, who was not her grown daughter's dad. And I said, it's time to talk to the girls. She would like to die.
Oh.
And he said, really? And he looked at her, and she said, I'm ready. And I said, okay, so now we got to get the girls in here. So the girls came in, and I said, we're going to have this discussion. Your mom is ready to die. And they looked at their mom, and she says yes. And so not a dry eye in the room.
Oh,
not
I'm
a dry eye in
Not a dry eye in this room. The
right?
tissues.
Not a dry eye.
Oh.
So I took her off the BiPAP and put her on a nasal cannula, and we got all the family in. And that night, I was off shift, but I came in my civilian clothes just to see where we're at, right? Because I don't stop the process. We do this all the way to the end. And the curtains were closed, and you couldn't have fit one more person in there. But she was laying there peacefully, just relaxing, listening to her family, just chatter, chatter, chatter all around her. And I didn't make a noise, but I stuck my face in the curtain, and she opened her eyes, and she looked at me, and she goes,
No.
Wow.
and I came in, and in front of her whole family, she says, I love you. Thank you.
Oh, dang it.
And I went over and kissed her. I kiss my patients, by the way. I don't know how many other nurses and CNAs and all that, but I kiss my patients. So the next morning I came back in. She hadn't passed yet, but it was just me and her daughter when she took her final breath.
Yeah.
And I tell you what, it was so gratifying because she got what she wanted.
Yeah.
And she got it beautifully done.
Wow.
And that is the most respectful, loving thing that we can do, is have that difficult discussion that nobody wants to have.
Wow.
Because we are all dying every single day. We are one day closer, every one of us, some of us catapulting in that direction faster than others.
Yeah.
Some with a terminal illness, some, that accident that happens that we didn't see was coming. Some of us at 90 with Alzheimer's. But we're all going there. So why can't we talk about it? Why does the finality is what makes it scary.
Yeah.
and a lot of people don't know where they're going to go. What's going to happen after they die? Well, it doesn't really matter. We're going there anyway.
Right. Right.
Yes.
Wow. So that was were you the respiratory therapist at that point in time, but you're getting these experiences and you're understanding what a gift you have for this end of life specialty, I guess.
Almost weekly. Yeah. If they had somebody dying in the ICU, they're like, hey, you're in this room today.
They just knew.
Yeah. They just said, I need you in here today. 'Cause you're up.
Well, it's really interesting because what a voice you were for that lady. Absolutely.
Yeah. So not only because of your knowledge of what you have seen for 15 years, but also your presence and your ability to just keep the calm, be logical, the voice of reason.
No lies.
No lies.
I don't lie to my patients. If somebody asks me where are we at, they deserve to hear the truth about where they're at and what's coming.
Wow.
So,
So you are an RT and you still are practicing.
Yep.
But also you have now just got a new certificate.
I am an end-of-life specialist, otherwise known as a death doula. But most people don't like that. I mean, if you say, hey, can our death doula come in and have a chat with you? You're like, Dad! No. Oh, our end-of-life specialist? You know what? That might be good to have that conversation.
Yeah.
And they're ultimately the same thing.
They're exactly the same thing.
Wow.
So you need to explain to us what this end-of-life specialist does and then tell us the differences between the hospice, palliative care, and that, if there are any.
So as soon as a doctor changes the orders to have palliative care come in and be introduced to that patient, they've basically made the decision to go to comfort care, end of life.
Mm-hmm.
Some palliative care people are able to have that discussion about death. And so the doctor has said, we're at comfort care now. This is what's going to happen. We're going to remove these cares. We're no longer going to treat with antibiotics. We're no longer going to provide food or drinks, or we're going to take you off life support, all these things. Palliative care becomes involved. They start writing the orders for morphine and medications that make that comfort care end of life possible within that facility.
Okay.
Hospice is assigned, same thing, but outside the facility. We're going home to die. They may or may not die. I mean, hospice, I think, is typically can be on board for like 6 months, but I've seen people graduate out of hospice.
Yep. I just did a home visit with somebody last week. They said, she is a graduate of hospice.
Right.
And
so
I was
she
like,
graduates,
yay.
you didn't die, you death defier. And so then as they get sick again, might have to go back into hospice, reinitiate that process. Hospice comes in, does that end of life care, can put that sub-Q morphine pump, and can do the end of life comfort care meds, and also do provide bedside cares and all that. So end of life specialist comes in, like myself, would have that, initiate that conversation with anybody who's having difficulty. So you know that your family member or patient is trending in that direction, but just has not had that conversation about death, is unable to have that conversation about death with their family because they may have multiple family members on polar opposite views on this.
Mm-hmm.
First thing I would do is come in and initiate that consult with the dying patient themselves and say, what do you want? This is where we're going. What would be a good death? What in your own mind, what would make it easier to approach that for you? What would make you comfortable? Well, my daughters don't talk. My daughter thinks I can't go to heaven because I'm not this religion. I mean, there's all kinds of issues.
Oh.
But you have that, and so once you know what mom or dad wants, as far as what they consider a good death would be, you say, are we ready to talk with the family? Can we bring them in? And then I represent their views to maybe mom can't say, hey, I'm dying. These words won't come out of my mouth. but I can say, hey, this is where we're going. This is what she would like. And this is how we can make that happen. And the most loving, respectful thing that a person can do for their loved one is to honor those last wishes, because we're only doing it once.
Right.
Let's do it clean. Let's do it nice. Let's do it loving and peaceful and beautiful, instead of having regrets, because we don't get a do-over on this.
Right.
So let's all come to the table and talk about how we're going to make this fantastic for her. And there's legacy projects where you can sit down and make photo albums, write stories, storybooks about mom's life, help write their own obituary, what they want said about them, what they want remembered about them. Those are legacy projects. There's such a thing as a living funeral. And so you can have this, we all have these great big funerals where everybody stands up and talks about how awesome Grandpa was, and this is my favorite memory. Guess what? We're going to do that before they die. We're gonna have them in the room. We're gonna have the flowers, the stories, the whole shebang. And I'm sorry, sign me up for the living funeral. I want it right now.
Yeah.
I mean, who doesn't want to hear? I mean, how many funerals have I been at where the talking goes on for hours about what a fantastic human being this was? Did you have that conversation with them before they passed?
Yeah.
Did they know this?
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah, that is just an incredible concept.
Yeah.
And I'm like, sign me up now, because I want to know. My own mom is a good example of this. My mom is, she's a humanitarian. She has brought in every stray animal off the street ever in my lifetime. But she has low self-esteem. You know, she had a mom that was not particularly kind. And she grew up not knowing her own self-worth, and at 83 years old, she still struggles with that. And she doesn't want a funeral. She doesn't want a funeral. But I can't think of no one who deserves a living funeral more, because my mom needs to know what every one of those grandkids thinks about her now, because she has no idea how loved and valued and amazing they think she is.
Wow.
So there's that. And then, we do vigils, death vigils. Here's the sad part. I have been at the bedside so many times when the family has said, I can't do this, walked out and said, call me when she's gone. And who's sitting there holding their hand when they take their last breath?
You.
Me. And I'm great with that, but it's hard. But I'm willing to do it.
Right.
So as an end-of-life specialist, if it happens to be one of those families that can't be there in the room, call me when she's gone. Okay, I'll be there.
Right.
Because in my opinion, nobody deserves to take their last breath alone.
And how wonderful that there are people like you who can do that, who can be there if the family just feels like they cannot.
Yeah, there's fear in passing alone. And if somebody's sitting there holding your hand, that alleviates the fear. That's a good death. Death with fear is bad.
We have seen that.
Encountered that with clients before.
Yeah, we've had some incredibly beautiful deaths. I know that's a weird way to put it, but a beautiful death is what you're talking about.
A good death.
Where they are at peace. They know where they're going because of their belief. The family is all on board. But we've had a couple that were hard because they went every minute yelling, screaming, fighting, pissed off at the world or at God or whoever. And it was horrendous.
It was a struggle to let go.
I got to tell you, I think we can alleviate that with those conversations beforehand. And I've seen it dozens of times. You have those difficult conversations, and they know what to expect. And also, at the time of death, families don't know what death looks like. A lot of them don't.
Oh, absolutely
So
not.
they're
Right.
like, what do you mean she's going to be, what is that death breathing thing?
Yeah.
If you have that conversation ahead of time, okay, things are going to get kind of wet and sound gurgly. But you know what? She's not suffering, not in pain. It's just what it looks like, and it's okay. It's harder on you than it is on her. So we're just going to do it together. You know?
Wow.
taking the fear out of it. But yeah, I think the conversation ahead of time to talk about those. Why are you angry about dying? I mean, I'm going there too. We're all going there. Let's figure out who we can get in here to make that easier for you.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the scenarios that we've encountered where people have had a very difficult time letting go is there was unfinished business. So it sounds like part of what you're doing is kind of getting those things out in the open and trying to mediate or navigate through those pieces that maybe need some closure.
And there are some family members that shouldn't be in the room. I'm just saying, because if that one family member walks in and then all of a sudden it breaks out in a screaming match, we don't have a good death anymore now, do we? We have a family fight at exit time, and nobody wants that. So that's also part of my job, is saying ahead of time, okay, you get your 20 minutes with Dad, but we want this, everybody gets to have their goodbyes. But if we can't do it without fighting, then some of you aren't going to be in the room. So we're going to agree to do this nicely, or you're not going to be in the room.
Do you feel that people are receptive to that?
Absolutely.
So you just go in and you kind of set the expectation, and
There's probably a relief that somebody's taking charge.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the rest of the family may never be able to say that same thing that I'm able to say with acceptance.
Well, and I was thinking just even the patient themselves probably can share with you things that they can't share with their own family, and then know that you're going to take it and help mediate through.
Absolutely. I've got this. I'm going to have that difficult discussion you haven't been able to have for 10 years. And
wow, that's heavy. How do you balance that?
I cry. So I mean, I'm Johnny on the spot, and it's calm and cool and collected, but guess what? I might cry for the next week after it's all done.
Wow.
But it's okay, because a beautiful death is worth it. I mean, we all have family issues that we all probably have that one or two family members that we really don't want in the room, because we know it's going to be a knockdown, drag out. But death is meant to be beautiful. It's final. We're all going there. It's the one and only thing that every one of us all have in common.
Wow.
The whole world has that in common.
That was a really...
It is. I mean, the one and only.
It's the one and only thing we all have in common.
Wow. I've never, ever thought about that.
How do you take care of yourself? So you cry, but what do you do for self-care?
I am deeply spiritual, and I work out, and I get massages, and I laugh a lot. I have dark hospital humor. I am super inappropriate with my humor, and it is an outlet. But I also have done this so many times that it's so gratifying. I think it's actually my favorite part of being a respiratory therapist is being there at the time. Keeping people alive is really gratifying. You have an 18-year-old in a car wreck, and they get to come off the vent, and it's magnificent. But seeing that 80-year-old grandma that has everybody in the room, and everybody is just telling her how much they love her, and you get to be there for that, just as good or better. Yeah.
Wow.
And I help people get things in order.
Yeah.
So there's the paperwork of this.
Good.
There's advanced directives. Those are forms that you fill out saying, in the event that I am unable to render care for myself, I don't want to be intubated. I don't want to have CPR. These are the steps that I would be willing to have done. I'd be willing to go on a BiPAP, but I don't want to be on a ventilator. Those forms are really important, and we can sit down and talk and fill those out together. For most people, those are pretty intimidating forms. What does this mean, DNI? Okay, we're going to talk about it.
Right.
Well, what if it's just pneumonia and I might come off of it? Well, we can talk about that too. There's also medical power of attorney. That's your most trusted family member that knows everything that you want, that you know is at the end of the day going to say, amongst all this fighting, y'all may not want Mom to pass away, but here's mom's wishes, and I'm in charge.
Yeah.
And so that medical power of attorney is respected in a medical facility. So if you come in without your documents done, your wishes are not lined out, you haven't done your advance directives, you have that hospital, they are absolutely legally obligated to do everything to keep you alive. And so that's what's going to happen.
So I want to ask you about, you had mentioned a story where maybe some paperwork wasn't in order to the degree that it should have been, and it was pretty tragic. Can you walk us through and talk to us about?
Yeah, I had a patient, male, mid-30s, came in, drug overdose, heroin overdose, as a matter of fact. I had him on the ventilator for days. We thought that his current girlfriend, significant other that he had a child with, was going to be the one that was going to be making his end-of-life decisions for him. He was brain dead. He was going to have to come off the ventilator. Perfect candidate for organ donation, which is such a gratifying thing because they get to live on through somebody else, save someone. So we thought we had our ducks in a row until we found out that he was legally still married to his wife, who he hadn't spoken to in 6 years. So not only were they estranged, they were no longer speaking, they had a bad ending, but legally they had not completed their divorce. And so he was legally still married to her. So legally she was the one that got to make his end-of-life decisions. So his family did not get to participate in that decision for him. And in the end, his wife that he hadn't spoken to in 6 years just called up and said, unplug him, and hung up on us. And guess what? That's what we had to do. So
no organ donation then?
No organ donation, no family buy-in on the decision, no his girlfriend, mother of his child that he lived with, helpless, didn't get to make any of that decision.
So yeah, that really drives home the importance of getting and having those papers in order, because it's out of you. It's out of, you got to follow the legal trail on it. And that is unfortunate.
It was devastating for every one of us.
Yeah, I can't imagine. I bet there were tears over that.
Anger,
Probably
anger, frustration and tears and helplessness. And she did not care.
Oh,
unplug him.
That's too bad.
Click.
That's too bad.
Wow. When we do home visits, some of the paperwork that we have, some of the questions that I do have, I have an advance directive form, because it is surprising to me how many people that I go out to, they haven't got any paperwork at all. And especially if we're going to start getting some confusion on board and all that, you better do it sooner than later. But it's such a good tool, because I have 2 different spots on my paperwork where I ask them about their advance directives. And then if there is, the one is full of definitions and such, but it's so easy for me to say, here, I'm going to leave this with you because this explains what you need to get started on. And we work so hard for education, prior proper planning. That's part of the reason that Inga and I do these podcasts, is we're hoping that something that we say will trigger it, right, or an episode that they listen to is like, oh my goodness, we have got to get on it. And that education, because people don't want to talk to Inga or Polly or Julie until they absolutely have to.
Correct.
Yeah.
And they may really, really like us, but they don't want to know what we do for a living, right?
Well, and you had that pretty staggering statistic. 80% of people want to die at home, only 20% do. So you had kind of given us some information ahead of time, and there are some barriers to getting to die at home, of which you had talked about the transparency from healthcare, a doctor maybe not wanting to have that tough conversation, so people don't really know. What about, you had mentioned lack of communication. Is that from a medical standpoint or family or just everybody in general?
All of the above. So typically what happens in a hospital setting is you've got a doctor on for a week at a time. That's what you've got in the critical care. So one doctor may have them for the week, and they're like, I don't want to have that discussion, so I'm just going to wait till Joe comes on Tuesday, and Joe can have the discussion. And then Joe gets on and goes, well, I don't want to have that discussion. So the next week goes by, and you're back to the same doc, and you're like, Oh gosh, I thought Joe was going to take care of that.
Oh boy.
So in the meantime, Polly took care of that and had the discussion. But we may have waited to the point where that person is too sick to go home. I mean, but there's some things you can't avoid. They may be too sick to make it home on oxygen to die at home. But first and foremost, a person can't prepare to die and get family members in to say goodbye if they're not told they're dying.
Right.
And there's your lack of communication.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, no,
lack
that
of
makes total
transparency. So my granddaughter didn't get to make it here from New York because nobody told Grandma she was dying until 5 hours before she did. So, so to be fair to everybody, have that truthful, difficult conversation. And yes, there's just some things you can't avoid. You may not be able to make it home, but if we have that conversation that this is where we're trending, we might be able to make it home on hospice and they get to die in their home. And that was the tough part about COVID is you couldn't have the whole family in.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, that was the worst thing for me.
Oh,
I love having an entire family in there.
Yes.
And then for an entire year and a half, it was just me and the nurse in there.
Yeah.
And the family was standing there at the glass watching or on a or on a Zoom call. And so that denied me of my favorite part of my job, which was having that good death. I'm sorry. It's so transparency and that communication ahead of time, allowing us to prepare. You can't prepare for something if you don't know what's coming.
Right. Wow. So basically, you've kind of walked through what your role as an end-of-life specialist is. How do your services get engaged?
People like you. Yeah. You say, this is a family that I know, we're chronic, we're trending, we're terminal. Mom just doesn't want to have that conversation with her kids, or we've got a really complex family situation here. Hey, we know Polly's got a really good way of addressing this with her patients and their families. Would you like to talk to Polly? Would you like her to come talk with you? Maybe she can, this is where we're headed, but sometimes families just can't have that conversation. Would you like her to come in and help? And then once I have that conversation, would you like me to be there till the end? Okay. And then a month later, hey, how are we all doing? Wow. What have we done since then? How is this? How are you guys processing? Is there any way I can help you? And during that, while we're sitting there at that death vigil, at that bedside, did you know that you can have a green funeral? Did you know you can have a funeral at home? Did you know, here's your options. There's so many options right now. Do you want to become a tree? Do you want to become a diamond? All these different things that people don't know about. Yep. Do we want to have a living funeral? Mom's got Doc says she's got a month left. Do you guys want to do a living funeral?
That seems like so much more fun.
Yeah. Right. Do you want to do a legacy?
Because then it's a celebration. And
when you say celebration of life, you literally are doing a celebration of life.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, I get excited just thinking about that. I'm like, yeah, pick me. I want to help with that. I want to help put that photo album together. Grandma's got 8 boxes of photos in the corner, but nobody has the time to sit down and help her put that book together and tell her story. Oh, I didn't know that Grandma was like a welder in the Navy. Grandma was badass.
Wow.
Yeah. So I get to help facilitate that. Yeah.
So are you then affiliated with the hospital, or are you independent? Or are you all of that?
I'm all of that.
Yeah. You're ready to jump in.
I'm ready to jump in and, inside, outside.
Because I do know that hospitals have a clergy, but you work hand in hand with them.
That's just part of the team. Yeah. Sometimes there's so many people that don't want religious services at the bedside, but their families do. Or the patient does, but the families don't. It doesn't, you involve them when they're ready.
Yeah.
Sometimes I work with chaplaincy. Sometimes priests come in and do last rites. Native American families come in, and I have, especially during COVID, I anointed with oils. We were allowed to do some smudging.
Wow.
It was amazing. I had a ventilator patient that was dying of COVID, and every day we would turn him over so he was face down, and he was face down for 20 hours, and for the 4 hours he was face up, we would do all the dressing changes, and I would anoint him with oils, and I would sing to him, and they would chant and dance, native dancing and chanting for the hour or two that we were getting him prepped to flip him back over. So tremendous.
Wow.
And I got to participate in that, and they got to see just how much we love them. That's part of it. They let people in like me because I love I love their family member. Like all of me. I love them.
Yeah, and they can just
That's
feel
very
that.
obvious.
I
Just
am
talking to
all
you. I
in.
mean, that's
Yeah.
very apparent.
And
So talk to me about after death.
after death. So there's also rituals for after death. Depending on what they want. If it's some Native Americans, they want to do the awake. There's some that want to help with bathing the body. There's some that just want to exit that room as soon as they're gone. There's calling the coroner. There's arranging for funeral service pickup. There's all those things that are going to change from one family to the other.
Yep.
But if mom has already told us what she wants, it's so much easier to do because you can already have had that conversation about this is how this is going to go. And when we're done here, you take as much time with the body as you'd like. There's some that stay for hours that stay by the body and just talk. And there's others that are out of the room as soon as that last breath is taken.
Yeah.
I'm good with any approach that's, it's not about making me comfortable.
Sure.
It's about making them comfortable.
You're obviously and work the same way we do with every family dynamic that we see, every family situation. There is absolutely no judgment.
Nope. It's bobbing and weaving, whatever makes it's back to the good death, because the good death isn't just for the patient that just died. It's also for their family.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. What did you say earlier? Grandma doesn't care because she's now gone, but it's the family that's hurting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This isn't, this is only painful for you guys. It's not painful for her.
Yeah.
Wow. I've learned a lot in these last 30 minutes or whatever.
Oh my goodness.
Wow.
That
What an incredible service.
Yeah.
And just an incredible human. It's so obvious just talking to you how passionate you are about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. And to kind of switch gears, tell us about Polly the singer.
Oh, I did not know she was going to do this to me.
Expect the unexpected.
This was not part of the program, just so we're clear. So I have 2 original albums out there. I have music video, but I started performing in probably high school. Still have my band, going to be playing in Spokane here shortly.
Nice.
And
I did not know you were a superstar on another level as well.
All
I'm
of them.
excited.
All of the levels.
Here's this really interesting story. I was at the bedside of a dying patient, and I sang one of my originals. Okay, I'm singing to her because Pat just loved my voice, and I was singing to her. Pat was ready to take her last few breaths. What I didn't know was that Pat's sister had just come in from New York, and I was singing this song to Pat. That is my original song, The Angels Cry. And Pat's sister says, I love that song. She's one of my favorite artists. And I said, what? And she goes, I love that song. I listened to it on Christian radio. I said, where are you from? And she goes, New York. And I went, that's my song. And she goes, no, I love this artist. I said, no, I'm that artist. That's me. So then I sang that at Pat's funeral a couple days later. But yeah, it was really astonishing for me. It was kind of like
wow.
It's like, okay, that's kind of weird that she listens to my songs in New York City on the radio. Okay, I'm not a big shot, but I really was like, it's what? I know it's on the radio, but here's somebody who's actually heard it.
Oh, that is.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Wow.
Yeah. That Polly, she's just pretty much a Jill of all trades.
A Jill of all trades.
Yes.
That's awesome.
She can catch a bear. She can track a wolf. She can help you go to heaven, and she can sing you all the way there.
All the way there. All the way there, baby.
Yeah. Well, and with that, we can flow right into our grandma sayings, which is actually a dad story, because you also know how to tag a calf.
Yes.
So tell us about that.
So I have on my Facebook page, I always post these. My dad is hilarious. He's going to be 87 in June. My mom's going to be 83 in July. And we are still ranching and tagging calves. And right now is calving season. And, you know, Julie and I we're raised with this blood and muck and cow poo. And
Exactly.
Yeah. So I'm out with my dad in the field in the morning, and we're going to tag this new calf. And we always give a vaccine, so there's a shot and a tag in the ear, and so we got the vaccine in, and this calf jumps up and goes and runs off. So Dad and I are about 100 feet apart, and Dad goes, "Act like you're its mother," and I'm like, I just started laughing because typically, Julie and I've talked about this, we would go, until this calf walks over and thinks it's our, So I said, I just started laughing and go, okay, come here, son. And this calf walked right over to me. And my dad's like, what? So I grabbed it by the leg and flipped it over and tagged it and said, that right there is how you tag it, Dad. That's how you tag a calf. So then we get back to the house, and he's so funny. He walks past me and he goes, you make a good cow. So I'm like, 5 days of Fred. So it was so hard to come up with a clean one. My dad is so funny that I've got years and years of 5 days of Fred on my Facebook.
Yes.
Most of them are not appropriate for this venue.
Perfect.
That one is.
Well, it does seem to me that you make a pretty good lots of things.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. We are just thrilled that you were here today and came all this way to visit with us and share this wisdom, because it was really, really deep.
Yeah.
We could obviously talk about it for several more hours. But what a way to start a conversation is just to say, hey, if you can't start that conversation, let's get you some help, because there are the people out there that this is their thing.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Most people don't know. And death is so hard to talk about. Not for me, but for 90% or more of the people out there. And then to have that conversation with the people they love, impossible. They just need that mediator that walks in and says, you know what? It's a coming. Let's talk about it.
Yeah. Yep.
Oh, wow.
Wow. Well, thank you so much. And listeners, if you haven't already, please go subscribe. You can do that on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts. You can do it on YouTube. Leave us a review. Share us with your friends. Join our Apaga Care and Share Facebook group. And let's get in the discussion.
Yes. Actually, Polly is part of our Care and Share group, and she likes to put her 2 cents in there, which we love.
Yes.
And so I can't wait till we put this podcast on there, because we'll have lots more that we can just keep talking if people join into that conversation and ask questions.
And if you have families that you know of that can't have that conversation, and we know it's coming, call me. Love to come join your family. And
we love it.
Yeah.
I love you said earlier something about it's just part of the team, right?
Part of the team.
Yeah. Well, you're part of this now. Awesome. Peace out, Girl Scouts.
Thank you, Polly. And
Thanks, ladies.
Well, just what a great day.